we will prevail over the forces of wickedness and evil. They cannot imagine what they have awakened. They cannot conceive of the army that they have arisen in all of us.
I have a question for White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller, who studied right down the road here at Duke University, and it's not a rhetorical question. Who is they? Who are you talking to?
You thought you could kill Charlie Kirk? You have made him immortal.
Again, who's you? According to law enforcement, there was one man involved in Kirk's assassination, one man. But I don't think that's who Miller and by extension President Trump is talking. The Trump administration, by their words and their actions since Kirk's death, want their followers to believe that anyone who has ever been critical of the far right, or Charlie Kirk, or President Trump, which is honestly about half of the United States and a little less than half of us here in North Carolina, is somehow responsible for Kirk's death. Instead of bringing the country together during this terrible moment in our history, they want to win elections, and worse than that, let's be blunt, in the left. Miller sounded, strangely, like President George W. Bush after 9/11 when he characterized the U.S. as defending itself in a war against evil, although at least in that case there was a well-funded, well-organized international terrorist organization called Al-Qaeda that was fighting a holy war against the West. But today, we're talking about one person accused of killing Kirk, one man whose reported motives are murky and tortured, just as they are with anyone who turns a gun on somebody they disagree with. Miller's speech positioned the president, Charlie Kirk, and their movement as the good in a battle of good versus evil. And the bad news is anyone who isn't a fan of the president is supposed to be the evil folks. There's no Al-Qaeda here. They're talking about you if you protested against President Trump or criticized Charlie Kirk. They're talking about me for speaking out against the president. They're talking about media who report the truth about the president and his allies, or anyone who put their money and their heart and their soul into supporting progressive candidates or causes. Even though the vast majority of us here on the left were just as sickened by what we saw in Utah. Here's what I see when I look at Miller's speech at the Charlie Kirk Memorial. I see that Miller and his movement don't just see this killing as a tragedy, they see one big opportunity. Miller, first as a congressional aide to Alabama Senator Jeff Sessions and now as a top advisor to President Trump, has built a career in a post-9/11 world out of villainizing immigrants and conflating Arabs with terrorists. And he took the same approach in his speech at Kirk's funeral. Only now the supposed villains he's talking about are ordinary Americans who disagree with the president. Think about that. It fits the administration's pattern since Charlie Kirk's terrible shooting. The right has repeatedly tried to connect the left, the whole left, to what happened while pushing the categorically false narrative that most political violence originates on the left. It doesn't, and there's a lot of research to show that, but that's not the point. This is an emotional appeal by the right to make the case that there shouldn't even be a political opposition to the president, which is something I never thought I'd have to say. To the folks who support the MAGA movement, I hope you take a step back and ask yourself whether anyone who disagrees with you, that's your friends and neighbors and your sons and your daughters, whether they're evil. Ask yourself if that checks out to you, and remember that one person's idea of evil might be somebody else's idea of good. This is a watershed moment for America. We're not the first country to arrive at a place like this. We're just the latest, where the government is shutting down comedians who mock them, where the president is draping huge banners with his face across government buildings, where he's sending military troops into his own cities, and where the people in power are trying to convince their supporters that anyone who disagrees with them is evil. The only question is what Americans will do next. Do we recoil and say, no, this isn't us, or do we shrug and say, that's politics, even though that's never really been the way we do politics in America? If you want to talk about American exceptionalism, yes, we've had more than our share of political violence. If you think about it, the Civil War is one huge act of political violence. But America, like it or not, is an idea. In its relatively short 248 years of existence, America has become one big metaphor for freedom and democracy, and for the idea that Americans try to coexist with people who we are passionately disagreeing with. What are we going to do next? Everyone, the whole world over, is watching to see the answer.